So we got a point. We did. Whatever other complaints you got, we got a point, Taylor.
I feel like it's got to be strange for people listening to the Quick Take, Hot Take episodes, because as you said last time, we don't do music on these. So I feel like if you expect that lead in, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Daryl's talking to my ears. I was not ready for that.
So yeah, welcome to the Total Soccer Show Quick Take, Hot Take review of USA 1, Panama 1, or should be Panama 1, USA 1, because this was the US away to Panama.
I'd say also Panama maybe more deserving of a point, if not all 3 points.
Yeah, so not the most impressive United States performance, but we still got out there with a point. That's the positive lead I'm going with here.
Sure, that the US has 4 points coming out of these games. That's what Bruce Arena said he wanted.
Hashtag get 4.
Yeah, but it does feel a little bit like that was sort of what you say because you can't guarantee that you're going to get 6.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you'd be an overly optimistic person to just say, we're going to definitely get 6 points for the next 2 games and then hang your reputation on that.
But I would say most people, and I don't think it's just the people who are like overly optimistic, oh, we won 6-0, we're going to blow everybody away, types of people that would say that I think everybody kind of expected a win here. Rightly or wrongly, I think a lot of people were anticipating a win.
Because we're all pumped after 6-0.
I think so, but I think it also, there were signs there, not just that it was 6-0. I don't think anybody expected 6 more goals or 5 more goals, anything like that. But I think it looked like a very...
one more in the last 10 minutes.
I would have enjoyed that. It looked like in that Honduras game, a cohesive unit that they had figured things out, they had a plan, they executed that game plan, things went the way they went.
Yes.
In this game, that didn't quite translate. No. And it felt like it was going to, and that's why I think you and I, or I'll say me, I don't know about you, but I had expectations that it would be a more kind of solid, cohesive game overall. And even when the U.S. scored, I was like kind of surprised because it's still very difficult to score on the road in CONCACAF, but it felt a little bit like, okay, now we got them because now they're going to have to get stretched. Now the U.S. can sit back and counter. Here we go.
I thought it was the beginning of something. I thought then we'd sort of frustrate Panama and maybe score again in the 75th as they were pressing up and we cast them on the counter. This would end 2-0. It did not. Instead, what they scored just a few minutes later. I just want to say, if anyone's listening to this for the first time, it's your first ever Quick Take, Hot Take. We literally hit record after the game is finished. We will do a full, long, in-depth review after we watch it twice tomorrow. So Wednesday afternoon, you can expect the in-depth review.
And the only wrinkle here being that we came straight from soccer, so we're a little bit behind. That's why this show is coming out a little bit behind.
I'll tell you what as well, we're normally not that great at no spoilers. So I want to say TSS high five. For neither of us checking Twitter and us watching it as live 40 minutes behind.
Yeah, which I know we go back and forth on because sometimes it's nice to not have the pressure to know what's happening so that you can kind of watch and know that nothing crazy is going to happen in this moment so you can analyze what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
But I still like the drama. I still like to have that belief in those final 5 minutes that something could happen even if nothing eventually did.
So we can't do any deep tactical analysis, but I agree with you that the US sort of didn't look as organised. The closing down space thing that we did against Honduras didn't look like it was happening at all in this game. It's sort of like the thing we were scared of, where maybe Bradley was left alone as holding midfield, and waves of attackers are coming at him. He sort of dealt with it against Honduras and couldn't quite deal with it against Panama. And I'm not sure why. But do you agree with me that
I do.
You saw that?
I do, and I think I want to add another thing here to say that if this is your first episode like this, as we were talking about before, the way we usually do this, we try to go in-depth as much as we can in the Quick Take, Hot Take based on our initial gut reactions of the game. This is the most I think I have looked forward to rewatching a game, this game tonight, because I think so many things went wrong for the U.S. that it's really difficult to say it was just this one person, it was just this thing. If they'd done this, then this would have been fine. It felt like there were routinely breakdowns where it was either the U.S. would get stretched and get forward and then there'd be opportunities at the back, or even when the United States had 6, 7, 8, 9 people behind the ball, there were still opportunities for Panama. It's
can we take a guess at why then? And with the caveat that, this is an overarching caveat for everything we're about to say, we'll double check tomorrow and we'll figure out the real reasons.
Sure.
But for example, why do you think the US looks so vulnerable? Because apart from the goal, there are a lot of Panamanian attacks.
Okay, I'll say this. In the preview, I said I wanted Jeff Cameron to start at right back, which was a weird thing to say for me because I would much prefer Jeff Cameron play center back. But a big part of it was that we knew Honduras were going to look to play some long balls over the top. Panama.
Balls,
Panama were going to. We knew that Honduras did, and Jeff Cameron won those balls. So I wanted Jeff Cameron in there doing that tonight.
A lot.
And I think the statistics on number of aerial challenges won by the United States back four would be very surprising.
Yes. I mean, so you can even point to the goal. The Panama goal, it came from, it's Machado or Machado, the right back. Big long throw, Laurie Delap for Stoke City style, kind of, into the US box.
I think you called him Laurie just then, but yeah,
Did I?
I'll let it
Delap,
slide.
sorry.
I'll let it slide in the sense that I won't let it slide and I'll call you out on it.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. So again, we'll have to rewatch it to figure out exactly like who's going for it, but it feels like there are 2 or 3 US players all jumping for it, and it kind of just hits Tim Ream in the hip.
But kind of jumping for it in a very like U12 sort of way, where it's like jumping, but not really jumping towards the ball, and kind of looking away at the same time, and no one really being entirely certain that they're going to make contact.
Is it one of my favourite theories, which is diffusion of responsibility, where if 3 of you are going for it, you all secretly 10% think that the other guys are going to get it, so you don't go, you don't keep it 100.
Yeah, I think
quote Larry Wilmot.
I think that's a part of it. I think the other 2 elements here that you also pointed out as we're watching it live is that, number one, a long throw-in like that, a long throw-in like that is really difficult to deal with if you're a defender, because you're used to, if a ball is coming in from there, it's usually a cross or a set piece, and either way...
This is why Stoke used to murder Arsenal with it.
Yeah, exactly, because either way, that thrown ball has a different trajectory, and it's much more difficult to mark.
Yeah.
On top of that, I do wonder how much the US knew that was going to be a thing, because it just felt like no one really knew how to attack that throw. It didn't seem like they had necessarily prepared for it, or that their preparations came through.
Ooh, okay. To address a Craig Allison point on Twitter, if this was a Klinsmann performance, we might be saying, I'll bet they didn't prepare for that, because that's not the kind of thing Klinsmann does. Bruce Arena, I would expect him to know that this is what Panama do with Mercado, and to have prepared for it.
And the reason why I think they didn't, it's not just because Panama score off that in the first half. In the second half, I mean, Roman Torres, he decides to flick the ball on, but it's the exact same thing, and he's wide open. I mean, he was marked, and this is, again, why we go back and watch it the next day.
Again, right?
But it's a long throw that he's wide open, and he chooses to flick it onto the back post as opposed to trying to turn it in on goal. Admittedly, at that point, he's like 12 or 14 yards away, so it's always going to be hard to score. But it still points to a huge dude, a big center back in the box is unmarked on a throw-in when you know it's going to be a long throw.
Okay, so that'll be a thing maybe we'll go back and watch tomorrow. We'll see if the US, the defenders, are talking about this before the long throw, as if there's a plan. Because the one thing I would say in Arena's defence maybe is Arsene Wenger and Arsenal knew about the Rory Delap long throw well in advance, and it happened to them 2 or 3 times before, and they still never quite had a plan for it.
True, right? Very true. And I do want to do that, but it also wasn't just those throw-ins. There were, like, especially in the second half, it seemed like U.S. defenders maybe were scared about pace, maybe they were worried about conceding a free kick or conceding a foul, but it seemed like the United States center backs in particular stopped going for headers. There was the one, I think, breakaway, the 2v2 breakaway maybe, or there's a couple different breakaways in the second half, which points to how
Panama breakaways?
Yeah, and how not good of a performance it was. But it comes from like Omar Gonzalez. Like, I think he's being backed up by either Tejada or Torres, and he kind of doesn't go for the ball. He tries to put his foot around the player to settle a goal kick, and that's never
Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, and it's never going to work. And that
Inspector Gonzalez.
That's first of all, I like it. Second of all, that's not going to work, and it feels like a very strange change in tactics when you're a big center back. You're going to contest that ball,
especially because that's what Omar normally does, right? Omar contests and Omar wins.
Yeah,
Darth Vader.
And so that to me is representative of the whole game, where it seemed like things were working in the beginning, and then slowly the U.S. stopped being aggressive, stopped really going for the balls, stopped trying to make things happen, and it became a much more passive game, exemplified by the fact that against Honduras, we were really worried that Michael Bradley was going to drop back and be that third center back. Yeah. He did that for, 2 or 3 minutes, and then the U.S. scored. Tonight, he did it a lot, to the extent that somebody tweeted, I forget who it was, I apologize, that like in the 73rd minute, you could see Tim Ream trying to push Michael Bradley forward. We saw Jorge Villafaña at the end of the game frantically like windmilling his arms saying, pull the ball forward, because the center backs were slowly working it around.
Here's my guess, is that Panama, especially later on in the game, did a good job of just sort of essentially sitting back in a shape, probably just a 4-4-2 shape, but a tight one, and not giving the US any options to pass through.
Yeah.
And that would explain then the centre back standing there with the ball under their foot being like, I've got no ideas.
And that's a thing we know is going to happen. The teams are going to sit back and bunker and wait.
Welcome to the Hex.
Right. But there were even times when the United States would get the ball on a break, they'd get past those first 2 forwards. And I know Panama would still have those 2 banks of 4 and do a good job keeping their shape. But that's when I think the United States have to be a little more aggressive. They have to be a little more daring. If that's Christian Pulisic trying to dribble at people, so be it. If it's Clint Dempsey dropping back and trying to combine. And it just felt like the United States routinely would get forward a little bit and then turn and come slowly all the way back.
Yeah. And also, so this is different to what you're talking about, but when you said the Christian Pulisic dribble forward, I remember the one kind of breakaway moment where he kind of just burst out of the midfield. And I think Clint Dempsey almost came and tackled him. And then Josie Altidore on the left ran into Darlington Nagbe. And it was almost this like... I was going to say Marx Brothers, maybe, type comedy.
It's like, yeah, I'll give it to you.
Almost like a physical comedy thing of just people all stepping on each other's toes.
I think Marx. I'm going to go Stooges. It felt a little Stooges, only because I think it ended.
That's what I wanted. That's the reference I was reaching for.
Yeah, because there's no Groucho in there being clever. Yeah, it's just a lot of people being like, "Hey, wise guy, get out of my way." You shout ahead.
Maybe Pulisic's Groucho.
Yeah, okay. I think he's not quite as verbally clever as Groucho, but still, yeah, he's got a ways to go.
So, okay, how about this then? We'll look into US problems tomorrow. But remember, we also scored first.
Yeah.
And we scored first through Christian Pulisic. Because one of my things, I didn't say this on the show, one of the things I said to you off air is we've all got to be a little careful with Christian Pulisic because you can be super talented and do impressive things and be capable of impressive things. But there will be games, especially in CONCACAF, where you go away to tough opponent, tough field, fireworks all night, 85 degrees, humidity, and you go and you try hard and you don't produce anything. And because it happens to Leo Messi, right? Argentinian fans get annoyed because sometimes Leo Messi just doesn't produce something. And they're all like, but he's Leo Messi. How come he's not producing something? And that just is how soccer is sometimes.
Yeah, or sometimes you're suspended for 4 games. Whatever.
Also that. But my thing with Christian Pulisic is I really was expecting that a game like this where he's getting fouled all the time, he got fouled a lot, that he would end up not producing something. Instead, he robs Beloy of the ball as Beloy's trying to turn him. He does so because he's initially running onto a through ball. He made a really good run to be open for. Then he sort of turns Beloy, evades Torres, and then quickly, as he's being sort of I want to say hip checked or ran into by Torres. So he's taken on both the centre backs. Finds Clint Dempsey open at the top of the 6-yard box.
Yeah, he cuts past Torres. Yeah, it's amazing, and it's amazing to be able to know where Dempsey is and to play that ball perfectly, and to ride those 2 challenges. Yeah, so that's very impressive, certainly. And reason for optimism, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the reason I'm optimistic about the Pulisic performance is even on a tough CONCACAF away night where you were getting fouled and the conditions are not great, he still produced something. And actually my expectations of Christian Pulisic have gone up a little because he was able to do so.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah. I can see that especially because I think I'm looking at my paper and 4 of my first 6 notes are Pulisic fouled, Pulisic kicked, Pulisic down and angry, Pulisic shoved. So I think
they went after him, right? They were taking turns to foul him for a little while.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like they had done their homework and knew that maybe he'd try to be a little bit dribbly, and maybe you kick him around, give him some bruises on those shins, and make him less inclined to run at them.
Harder to dribble with all those bruises.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. So I think that he scored after that because I think we were both a little bit concerned.
Assisted.
It seemed like whatever, he scored. It seemed like he was getting a little frustrated. It was a little bit shades of that Cuba game where it's hot. It's not really fun playing conditions. You're getting frustrated. You're getting kicked. Maybe it's not going your way. It felt like that tonight, and that he was able to kind of rebound and have a few of those very shining moments was very exciting. Yeah. But I also think maybe those shined a little bit brighter because of the duller performances of some of his teammates.
So he was a diamond among topazes?
Sure, guy who writes about jewelry. And I think with that in mind, it's worth talking about that center midfield pairing.
Okay, Jones and Bradley?
Because I think we were both, again, I'll speak for myself. I shouldn't say we. Yeah, I'm inclined to say we because, we've been around for a while. I think I was very excited to see Jones back and see what Bradley and Jones would do. Yeah. But then I think it was that sort of momentary, but that means Pulisic's not central anymore. I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah. And it did seem like tonight there was some miscommunication. It seemed like maybe the formation didn't suit Jones and Bradley, and I think even when Jones went out and Acosta came in, I don't think it worked that well. It seemed like neither one was entirely certain when to step, when to stay. Even the phone would agree with me on that, apparently. And so it just felt like
actually a continuous glucose monitor.
Oh, nice. Okay, more important, maybe. And so it felt like in that Honduras game where everybody kind of knew how to step, how to show, how to block off passing angles. Here it felt much more like, okay, let's at least just get everybody behind the ball, and we'll make it hard for them to pass through. Yeah. And with that, that's a much more reactive rather than proactive approach to defending.
I think when we rewatch, I'm pretty confident that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a US team that just sort of retreats into a shell instead of goes at, weirdly, as Honduras are coming at us, we went at them and blocked off all their angles. Yeah. So we were a bit more reactive. But maybe, to give the US some credit, maybe that's a smarter approach when you're away. And you're happy to get out of there with a point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the thing though, and maybe that's where I'll have to divorce emotion from just objective analysis. But I wasn't happy with the point. It seemed like this was a game that the United States could have gone down there. No Blas Perez, he's injured. I forget who the other guy was who's been sent home because he had disciplinary issues. So it seems like this wasn't a full strength handball team that
His first name is Fidel. I'll tell you that.
That is correct.
Escobar.
That also is correct.
Yeah.
Well done, Daryl Grove. Memories. Good job. So it felt a little bit like Panama were maybe a little bit more vulnerable than they have been in the past. I do think that the referees maybe could have called a tighter game, could have thrown a couple cards out there earlier on. They didn't do that, so
I thought some of those early Panama fouls, especially on Pulisic, but also on other players, was worth a yellow card to just be like, hey, no more of this, guys.
Am I correct in saying that there weren't any cards on the evening? There are none that I can remember.
I can't remember either.
Yeah, I think the only time I thought for sure the U.S. was going to get one was when Bedoya tried to stop a throw-in. But then I think he was let off by the fact that there were substitutions happening.
Yeah,
otherwise, he might
right?
have gotten a booking because he was annoyed with some contact.
Can we also talk a little Josie?
Sure.
So
are we done talking Bradley Jones then?
No, not if you're not.
Well, just I think that I was expecting more from that midfield pairing, given that you are breaking up what worked against Honduras, that you're moving Pulisic back out wide, you're keeping Nagbe on one wing, but you're going essentially to a 4-4-2. I think you were pretty surprised to see a 4-4-2 versus a 4-4-2 in a World Cup qualifier.
It felt like it was the 80s.
It did, right?
Yeah.
And so it seemed like with that there would have been more of an idea of what we're going to do.
Arrived in a DeLorean.
Yeah. It's I know you haven't watched much of it, but it's like the conversation we've been having about Stranger Things, where you're like, it just was a little bit too 80s. Maybe that's what it was tonight. It's like, come on, guys, like things have happened since then. We don't have to keep referring to the 80s with this formation. But so it felt like if you're going to make that change, then there are reasons for it, and then there are things the United States is planning, and there are ways that they're planning to approach the attack. And in the end, it felt like the common problems of the 4-4-2, that you had your forwards get a little bit stranded.
Yep.
You had then Clint Dempsey dropping way back in to try to pick up the ball, which meant Michael Bradley dropping deep, which meant Josie Altidore up top by himself.
Yes.
So then he kept getting the ball, but not really getting the ball.
And he weirdly struck a lonely figure, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like he was a solo striker because Dempsey was coming deep.
Yep.
Yeah. But if then Dempsey doesn't come deep and stays with Josie, then you've got what I believe Matt Doyle once called the 4-4 gap 2.
Yep.
Right? So yeah, it's almost like you couldn't win in that situation.
Yeah. And so I think...
Or Josie could be better at being a lone striker.
Yeah.
Is the way that you win. I got to say, I was so happy with him against Honduras. Wasn't thrilled with him against Panama. And actually, I don't really want to talk about it too deeply. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
If you've got more to say about the midfield.
Not really, other than I think like some of the biggest effort we saw from him was when he subbed out, and that was saying something because he walked off the field. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm not saying he didn't try. I'm just saying I think it wasn't the approach that suited his abilities the best.
Well, Beloy and Torres are both pretty physical defenders, and he sort of didn't win those physical battles, right?
Right, and I think another element here is that the United States went from, I'm going to say it again, a proactive to a reactive approach, because I think the times that we saw Villafana getting forward, and I think that's why Zusi started, is because they wanted to get those fullbacks forward because they knew it was going to be a bunkered defense.
Yeah, 2 attacking fullbacks we started with, right?
And they really stopped going forward in the second half.
We should also check maybe before we record tomorrow's show, was Jeff Cameron injured in any way?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because that may be one of the reasons he wasn't involved.
Except that he was on the bench and I think listed as a sub. Okay. So usually if you're injured, that's not the case. But could be wrong.
Yeah, okay.
But it felt like in the first half, they were much more involved in the attack. They were much more likely to get forward. And I think as the United States started to feel more and more vulnerable about that counterattack and looked more vulnerable, those two defenders were more inclined to stay home a little bit.
More likely
to
get out of here with a point.
Yeah, and then again, you have suddenly like your midfield has too many people in it, but it's also too stretched, and then you don't have any width, and then you have a forward up top by himself.
Yep.
It doesn't really lead to a lot of conducive attacking play.
One more thing I'll say about this.
It isn't conducive to a lot of attacking play. There it is.
One more thing I'll say about central midfielders. Much as I agree with, I've seen some criticism on Twitter about reuniting Jones and Bradley.
Yep.
I think it might have been more about the tactics than the partnership, because Kellyn Acosta, we ride for Kellyn Acosta on the Total Soccer Show. He came in and essentially did the Jermaine Jones job, played alongside Michael Bradley. Didn't look any better. In fact, probably looked a little worse.
Right.
He was kind of, I want to say, a little bit more timid than we expected.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier, when it was like both of them, it seemed like they were just trying to drop in and get numbers behind the ball, rather than what I think really worked for Bradley in that Honduras game was that he had people working to get back and working to block off options so he could just slow things down. Tonight, it felt like he had more responsibility to step and try to win tackles and knock people off the ball, and really
which he's not great at. We talked about
which he's really not good at. I would say it's really.
Like we said, he's a nerd, right? He's a better reader than he is a fighter.
Yeah, and I think tonight he had to be a fighter, and that's not what you want from Michael Bradley because he's not going to excel in that role.
So is that why you put Jones alongside him?
I mean, I think that's maybe the idea, but I think tonight
this is like when Milhouse makes friends with Nelson.
Yes, yes, you team them up and it works well. But it felt like tonight Jones was a little bit not like, I think it was maybe like, oh, right, this is what World Cup qualifying is like. I missed that last game. I forgot. It's a little bit intense and a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
And he just kind of, I mean, to the extent that I think within like the first 5 minutes of the second half, you were like, I'd be okay if Jermaine Jones came out.
Yep. Okay, anything else to say before we shut down this quick take, hot take, and we get to the serious work of the deep dive review tomorrow?
I mean, I'll say very quickly, thank goodness for Tim Howard, because he definitely had at least 2 saves, one of which I think was lucky that I think it kind of like ended up between his legs. Yeah. But still, he had a couple big saves for the U.S., and then it's a lot of that.
I felt safe.
I always do. And even the goal, I think if you watch the slow motion replay, because they had one like ultimate slow motion, it looks worse because it goes under his arm, but it goes under his arm because he's sprinting back across the goal because suddenly there's a guy wide open inside 4 yards or whatever.
Gomez.
And so he's doing that kind of like cover to the near post and then like dive across and just try to jump out and like basically jumps out as like an X, and that leaves a lot of space.
That's just cover as much space as humanly possible with my body.
Exactly.
Right?
So I think no responsibility at all there, no fault at all for Tim Howard, but really did do a good job of, again, doing the Tim Howard thing of yelling at people, keeping people organized, having some words when he needed to, but also pulling out some saves that maybe other goalkeepers wouldn't have been capable of.
Okay. So final thing I want to say is, again, we'll do the full review tomorrow. We'll figure out some of the more tactical stuff, but don't be too down on the US national team, right? Because we have got 4 points from 2 games. We had 0 points from the first 2 games. And we went away to Panama, which is not easy, and came out with a point, even if it wasn't the best performance.
And if you want to go back to how difficult it can be to play in Central America, U.S. Soccer, I think on Facebook, posted video from one of the rooms of the fireworks going off, like next to the hotel. And it's not just like, oh yeah, there are fireworks like in the background. It is very much...
Yeah, it's not 4th of July, right?
It is very clearly people outside of the hotel setting off fireworks to try to keep U.S. players awake all night. So, I mean, it's definitely not a particularly hospitable area to play if you're a U.S. player.
That's why sometimes it's okay to get a point. He said, knowing that he may have different things to say after he sees the game.
Oh, I mean, I have different things to say right now. I would say that it should not have been okay to get a point tonight, and I was a little bit frustrated that it seemed like in the last 15 minutes or so, the U.S. At least half the team, and then the other half didn't, which is why I think you had people frantically gesturing, get the ball forward.
Oh, that's interesting. So you think there's like half the team going for 3 points and half the team settling for a point?
Maybe. Or maybe it's just sort of like, hey guys, we should maybe try to do something.
I kind of feel like maybe when you saw Villafania gesturing to Tim Ream to get forward and Tim Ream holding back, like he's going 3 points, Tim Ream's going 1 point.
Yeah, Tim Ream's going, I don't want to be responsible for 0 points, so 1 point will do.
I would have taken 2 points.
Okay. I'm not sure how, but why not? Yeah.
All right,
we split them. We get 2, Panama gets 1. Sure.
Thank you, listeners, for listening to our Quick Take, Hot Take, and we'll be back with you on Wednesday afternoon with our full game review.
And I'm going to say literal hot take because at night in our building, the AC goes off.